Welcome back to Green and Wild. Today we are in the beautiful coastal town of Whitianga, visiting Andy and Christine's stunning gardens. When they moved to their property a few years ago, the gardens were overgrown and in some serious need of TLC. They also had some other challenges, such as having to rebuild the whole retaining walls and walkways, which weren't safe and council approved. But with their passion for gardening and vision for colorful outdoor spaces, they transformed their place into a vibrant and thriving paradise. Let's dive in and see how this garden has blossomed into something truly special.
So I'm Andy Woodhouse, and Christine, my wife, we've been in New Zealand 21 years. We moved over from England. I've worked for the last 30 odd years in youth and community work. I started off with Duke of Edinburgh's award over here, and then I worked for Spirit New Zealand for a while, and now I'm working mostly from home, but I work in the intellectual disability sector as a project manager for the Helen Anderson Trust down in Christchurch. And we started off in Whangapara because we had a 14-year-old daughter and 19-year-old son when we first came, so you've got to be near a $2 shop, a cinema and a McDonald's, or they'll just shrivel up and die. So we lived there for 10 years, and then we moved out. We did the lifestyle plot thing out in Copper. We had 8.5 acres there and our own cows and stuff. And that was really good, but Christine got really sick. There was something there. We don't know whether it was tank water or whether it was she's super allergic to something blowing around in the woods. And after the first lockdown, our retirement plan had been to come and live somewhere like Whitianga. And we decided we'd come down here. And we came down here for a week, and Christine got better. And we went back to Cowcop, and after a couple of weeks, she was sick again. So we came a few more times and found that every time she was here, she got better. Every time she went back to Cowcop, she got sick. So there was an opportunity to be doing hybrid working at Spirit New Zealand after lockdown. So I could do 3 days a week in Auckland, and then Mondays and Fridays working from home. And that worked. Stayed at my mum's for a couple of nights a week. And we brought the retirement plan forward, and we found this house, which was uncomplied, but it was a bit of a bargain, and we knew we could get it going. But we had to rip the whole garden out because the retaining walls were totally uncompliant. So they all came out, and the wonderful Frank Dyer and his crew put these new engineered, approved and complied solutions in. But that left us with no garden. It was just brown dirt up to here, kind of subsoil. And Christine found that very depressing because, you know, there's two things a house needs, according to Christine. That's a cat and a garden. We did the garden first, and it started off with me putting one plant in here because she'd got so upset and so depressed I couldn't bear it. So I thought, well, if I put a plant in, I know what's going to happen. It's like when I go in the kitchen and start to cook, Christine comes out and takes over and you get better food. So I put a plant in here while she watched me in the rain, and then I tried to put another one in, and she's like, "You're doing that wrong." So she came out here and boom, just away she went. That one little thing got put in and the garden came from there. But we moved out to New Zealand from England because I was working away from home a lot, doing Duke of Edinburgh's Award expeditions and stuff like that. Christine said, "You've got to leave me somewhere better than Dunstable," which wasn't a difficult thing to find, to be honest, moving out to New Zealand. But down here, Whitianga, honestly, it really is an awesome place to live. 2 minutes from the seaside, and it's kind of remote but not isolated. So you're away from the things in the city that we don't find brilliant, far enough for that not to affect us. But this place is never dead. There's always somebody here, and there's stuff going on the whole time. It's a thriving community, and it's exactly what we came to New Zealand for, to live in a little seaside community and have a wonderful time and create this garden. Right, my interest in gardening is because I've always grown up with gardens. My grandmother was a keen gardener. My mother also, but my granny was much more like Christine in what she did, always created these wonderful gardens with a long-term view. And so, I mean, I got into it through digging holes and moving stuff around, building rockeries. But Christine's been into it all her life. I mean, she's been growing stuff since her granny first gave her some little seeds to grow in the garden, which I think is how a lot of kids get into stuff. I think the importance of a garden, certainly the gardens Christine creates, is because like what she creates is just a haven of tranquility. It's like kind of meditation. It's just there, and you walk out into the garden, and it makes you feel a certain way. And I'm used to that, and so I don't do well in a kind of a concrete urban jungle. So having something like this is incredible, and also it's good for the cats. It's good for the bees. It's good for a whole load of stuff. We're not big veggie gardeners. We do it. There are veggies spread around in here, but um, the flowers create that outdoor decor, and they just create an amazing atmosphere. So I think it's a really important part. And I think when we eventually sell this house, it's going to be the garden that sells it, because it's one of those things that's emotional. And you walk into it and you just feel the feeling of being in that garden. I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted on this channel, but really that's how we got into it. I know little bits, but with me really it's like building retaining walls, digging holes, repairing pots and all that kind of stuff. Christine is an artist in many forms. She paints, she draws, she's done calligraphy, knitting, fabric arts, fibre arts, you name it. And this is her palette. I'm sure she's a reincarnation of Gertrude Jekyll, because she paints with plants. And I just love that. There's certain things I don't like in a garden, like regimented beds and stuff like that. There's kind of wild abundance. And, we'll see a plant beside the road growing wild, and Christine, oh, that's such and such a thing. We take a cutting and drive home and plonk it in, and the next thing you know, there's heaps of it. And the bougainvillea up there, that reminds us of when we lived in Greece. We had a bougainvillea around the balcony of the house we lived on. But I think, people who don't have gardens are missing something. And I'm not surprised that people who live in urban areas in blocks of flats can suffer from some fairly gnarly mental health problems. And I think it's because they don't have a garden. It's just healing. It's just out there. I think what makes Christine such a good gardener, and me probably not such a good gardener, is the ability to think long term. You see these little green shoots or a packet of seeds, and you know what they're going to do over what kind of time frame. So she's got her perennials and her annuals and her half-hardies and all those kind of things. I hear these words, I don't know what they mean, but she sees how that all goes together. She thinks in a very holistic sense about a garden, uh, which is excellent, because I take photos and put them on my Facebook page regularly throughout the year, about every 3 months. And even in June, which is midwinter here in New Zealand, there's colour in the garden. There's not bare patches of earth. So I think there's a certain mindset you need, and patience. You've got to be able to lose yourself in it. And Christine, one of her earliest memories is being in the garden and staring at some kind of a lily and just losing herself in it as if she was a little bee crawled into it. That's kind of her first meditation, I think. The other thing you need really is a worm farm, because we've had 2 houses on the trot that have basically, the garden has been comprised of subsoil, and we've made proper dirt from that with newspaper, worm tea, and worm poop, masses and masses of it, and dig out little pockets and put in your compost, because an understanding of the soil and what the soil needs is also essential. So over the 8 years we're at Cow Copper, we went from no topsoil to it being about at least that deep, like kind of 150 mil, just through worms pulling stuff through and putting on the worm tea and fertilizing it. All those things are important, but I think really not being afraid of your failures, because we put plants in sometimes and they just die, and they might have been quite expensive plants, but we know they didn't do too well. There are some things here you have to understand you're playing God, because I know a lot of English gardeners would love to be in the position we are in, where agapanthus grows so well it's just a weed. You have to be prepared to just chop the heads off as soon as they're about to seed, and get rid of certain things, because some things that have come from England to New Zealand, well-intentioned people have brought them here, and they just run rampant and take over. So it's keeping that in check. But it's it's a heart and soul thing. I think I wouldn't be a very good gardener because I'm too, you know, too practical in some ways. You know, I can take engines apart and put them back together and they work. And that's because that's the set of definites. Christine's very good at working with the grey areas, with a set of variables, improbabilities, and just sheer chance, luck, and the universe being in the right mood at the right time. I can't do that, and I really have huge respect for people that can and seeing that potential. So yeah, I mean, if you're thinking of having a garden and you don't have a garden, look, just do it, but don't be in a hurry and do the research. There's heaps and heaps of stuff out there on YouTube and things like that. And at the end of the day, you can go down the warehouse and whatever they're selling is going to grow in most gardens in New Zealand. So you can mix and match, you can make some mistakes, but you can transplant your mistakes, you can move plants around. So nothing's ever permanent. Now this plant here is the best thing ever to come out of Australia. I don't know its Latin name, but it's called Aussie Crawl. And it's really good for covering stuff that's otherwise too precipitous to do anything with. This started out as 3 little plants that we bought from the garden centre, 1, 2, 3, and it's just spread on. This has been here, like I say, a couple of years, maybe 2.5 years at the most. And look what it's done. It's just filled in the gap exactly. There's no cutting, no sticking, no folding. It just does it. We used it in our last garden as well because we had a bank that just needed covering up and holding together. So yeah, Aussie Crawl, absolutely recommended where you don't know what else to do. But the great thing about gardens is that they mature, but they're never really finished. They're different every year and constantly changing because some plants have a limited lifespan and some plants are around forever. And I think with Christine, that's important to her because with the various art mediums she's worked in, once she gets good at them, she loses all interest. It's the learning, it's the striving that really lights her fires. And so this garden will continue. Like, for instance, we weren't going to have, that's just an old wire fence. And there's jasmine growing over it. It's become a jasmine hedge. That was never the plan there, but that happened. And so, hey, we run with it. And I suppose the future for this garden is it will carry on. There's always something we've got to do. There's a bit up there where the bank's got fried in the sun and it's falling apart. So we're going to put something up there to hold the moisture in and keep that going. So it's hard to say how the garden is going to evolve, only that it will. And some of these plants will get too big, and I'm looking forward to the bougainvillea just taking over the whole of up here. I think in the future for us as people is there comes a time in your life where you really need a bungalow and somewhere on the flat because there's a lot of steps on this house. It's on multiple levels, which we absolutely love. But there's going to become a point when that's impractical. So next garden, we're already planning our next garden. We don't know when it's going to be, but it's going to be a walled garden because that's a very English thing, isn't it? But they have a certain ambience, a certain atmosphere. We may do it in brick. We don't know what we're going to do it in, but that's I think what we'll do next is a walled garden because it's easier to get into and out of, and you can't really bring a wheelbarrow up here because we're on the top layer of the terraces in the pergola, and so everything that's up here is light. Has to be carried up here, usually by me. I can still carry 2 bags of fertilizer at once, and that's a good thing. But that's the ever-changing nature of gardens, and that's just I love that because each year we think, what are we going to see this year? Each winter, you're like, oh, that's still here at this time of year, and you see that whole succession of the seasons and the types of plants. And the more the garden matures, the more different types of things you get in there, and you can see what needs to change because plants move around. Plants do different things, and you may end up with a bare patch. You may end up with a patch with too much in it, and then you just rip that out. So it's been scientifically proven that people who do gardening when they're old get much older than people who don't. I think it's very good because it's that low impact exercise and it keeps the mind alive as well, and it keeps the mind happy. There's that sense of joy that you go out there. I've seen Christine sometimes when it's raining and she's sitting there thinking, it's raining, I can't go out in the garden. And suddenly she'll get some inspiration and boom, there she is, soaking flipping wet. And something else is happening in the garden that's really exciting. So yeah, it's like a part of our life that we always take with us. A garden, the garden, whatever it is. And wherever we move, we have a garden around us. And that's kind of like, that's a constant, but it's a changing constant. It's beautiful, I love it.